Hey everyone. As I mentioned in the last lecture, in this one, we're going to install SQL Server on our local machine and then import the dataset that we'll be using. Something that I'd like to mention here before we start is that for this course, I'm going to be using Microsoft SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio, which is the database management system for Microsoft SQL Server. Unfortunately, Microsoft SQL Server doesn't work natively with Mac. But if you are taking this course on Mac, then that's also fine. You could use either MySQL or PostgreSQL, which are another two types of relational database. So either of these would work fine. Of the two, I would recommend MySQL because it's very easy to set up and has a very similar syntax to Microsoft SQL Server. The reason that I'm using Microsoft SQL Server and not a cross-platform alternative like MySQL is because Microsoft SQL Server will be the database that the majority of businesses use. So most of the work that you'll be doing will involve Microsoft SQL Server. And also, speaking from personal experience from the work that I've done, I'm yet to find a company that doesn't use Microsoft SQL Server. So learning this will stand you in good stead. If you've got any questions about this, or you're having issues with MySQL, then please let me know down in the Q&A section below, and I'll of course help you to get it sorted. With that said, let's get started. Okay, the first thing that we're going to need to do is download and install Microsoft SQL Server. From Google or any other search engine, let's search for Microsoft SQL Server, and then the link that we're looking for should be the first result, which is just SQL Server Downloads. I'll provide a link to this in the resources for this lecture too. From here, we want to scroll down to the download button for the Developer Edition. The Developer Edition cannot be used in any production environments, but as this is just for demonstration, testing, and development purposes, we're okay to use this version. I'll go ahead and download this, and then launch the installer. From here, we can just choose the basic install option, which will install all of the basic features with a standard configuration that works straight out the box, which will be perfect for us. Read and accept the terms, and then choose where you want to install it to. I'll leave it at the default, and then click on Install. And then I'll just fast forward while this installs. Okay, so we've now installed SQL Server itself. The next thing to do will be to install our database management system, which for Microsoft SQL Server is called SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS for short. Let's click on this button here, which says Install SSMS, and that'll take us to the Microsoft website where we can download it. I'll scroll down to where it says Download SSMS, and then click on the Download button. This will download another executable file, which I'll go ahead and run after it's downloaded. I'll leave it at the default location and just click Install. And then again, I'll come back after this has finished installing. Okay, now that it's all installed, we can click Close on this, and I'll also close this window here too. Let's now check that this is all installed correctly and that SQL is running. I'll search for the Configuration Manager, and from within here, we just need to check that the SQL Server service is running, which we can see that it is. If this service is not running, you can just right-click on it and hit Start from within this menu. If you wanted to, you can also stop the service from here too. In this case, it's all running fine, so I'm going to close this window, go back to our Start menu, and this time I'll search for SQL Server Management Studio, and we should get this option here. I'll go ahead and open this up. Nice one. We're now inside of SQL Server Management Studio, and the first thing that we'll get prompted to do is connect to our server. We've got our server type, the server name, which is just the system name of our PC, and then at the bottom we have our authentication settings. We can just leave this as Windows authentication, as we don't have any other methods set up. And also here, if your server name is blank, then you can find what it should be by going to command prompt and typing in hostname, which will return your PC's hostname, which we can see here that these two match. And then from here, you can just copy this over with Ctrl+C and paste it with Ctrl+V in the server name box. Before we connect to this, there's one final thing that we'll need to do, which is check this box down here, which says Trust Server Certificate. Because encryption is set to mandatory, SQL Server Management Studio will need to know that the certificate is trusted. With all of this set, I'll go ahead and click Connect. Awesome. We've now connected to a Microsoft SQL Server instance that is running on our local machine. On the left-hand side of this page, we've got what's called the Object Explorer, which allows us to see all of our connected databases, as well as all the associated settings and information. At the top of our tree, we've got the server that we're currently connected to, which is currently our own server that's running on our local host. And below this, we've got all of the folders that make up our server instance. The one that you'll be using most often as a data analyst is the databases folder, which if we open this folder up, we'll see that there's no databases inside of here yet. So the next step will be to create a database. Let's right click on our databases folder, and then from in here, we have the option of either creating a new database where we could enter our own data and tables manually using the create and insert statements, but we're actually going to restore an existing database that's already got all of the data inside. The main reasons for doing this are firstly, that by using an existing database, we'll have a load more data that we can work with and analyze, as well as the fact that creating a new database isn't really the job of a data analyst, and would normally be the job of a database administrator or data engineer. The data that we'll be using is actually an open source dataset from Microsoft, which contains information about a fictitious bicycle manufacturing company. The dataset's called AdventureWorks, and it can be downloaded from the Microsoft website. I'll provide you with a link to this in the resources for this lecture. So if you come over to this website and scroll down a bit, we'll need to click on the AdventureWorks 2022.back file from under the OLTP column. Back in SQL Server Management Studio, I'll right click on our databases folder again and select Restore Database. Then we'll select the device option here, and in the menu, just the ellipsis button here. And then I'll add in the .back file that we just downloaded. Let's hit OK on this, and OK again, and then OK again, which will basically just create this database for us. We can see that it's restored successfully, which is great. Back over in our Object Explorer, you'll see that we now have a new item within our databases folder, which is called AdventureWorks 2022. We can see that this is a database by the little database icon to the left of it. If we open this up by clicking on the plus icon, we'll get to see all of the information that makes up this database, like the database diagrams, tables, views, external resources, and more. The most commonly used one here is the tables folder. If we open this one up, we'll get a list of all of the different tables in this database, of which there are quite a lot. And looking down this list, these all just relate to different areas of business function, like HR, people, production, purchasing, sales, and so on. And in a simple sense, each one of these tables is like a worksheet in Excel, with rows and columns inside of each table. Okay, and that then wraps up our lecture here. We've been through and installed Microsoft SQL Server, as well as the database management system for this, which is SQL Server Management Studio, as well as importing the data that we'll be using throughout this section too. In the next one, we're going to learn how to query and pull data from our database, starting off with the select and from statements, and then building on top of this by adding in the where statement too, so that we can select data based on different conditions. But we'll see all of this put into practice in the next lecture. Thanks everyone. If you've got any problems or questions about this, especially if you're on Mac, then please let me know and I'll help you out.